Hello, students. Welcome again to the session on Rabbi Ben Ezra by Robert Browning. We have read earlier in the last session about the life and important works of Robert Browning. Just a quick recap that Robert Browning is known to be an important literary figure of Victorian English literature, and he was a poet in the Victorian age who is highly regarded in his times. Science and discoveries and during the Browning's age created problems for religion and traditions, and there was self doubt and questions were raised on religion and Bible because it was a period of doubt and confession. So this all these things become the theme of Browning's poetry, and it is reflected in most of his dramatic monologues. Browning is considered to be a major poet of his time and also an important influence on modern poetry. Although he did not receive much acclaim and fame during his lifetime, but later on he was regarded as a wise old man. And modern critics like T.S. Eliot, they also hold him in high esteem. When we look at Browning's career as a poet, and divide his period as per his thematic journey and poetic journey, it is divided into three periods. First was the period of immaturity, which was from 1832 to 1840. Then we have a kind of maturity after receiving comments by critics that he was too subjective, which was a period of maturity. And then when he did not produce much, which was a sort of decline of his poetic talent. Coming to the poem Rabbi Ben Ezra, this poem is narrated by Rabbi Ben Ezra, who was a real 12th century scholar. Now, this poem or piece does not have a clearly identified audience or a dramatic situation. And when the poem starts, Rabbi begs his audience to grow old along with him. And he stresses that age is where the best of life is realized, whereas youth shows but half. He also acknowledges that youth lacks insight into life since it is characteristically so concerned with living in the moment that it is unable to consider the deeper questions of life. Further, he says that youth will fade. What replaces it is the wisdom and insight of age, which recognizes that pain is a part of life and also learns to appreciate joy more because of the pains that one suffers or experiences in his life. And he says, be our joy is three parts pain. Now, all the while, one should appreciate what comes, he says, since all adds to our growth towards God, and we must embrace the paradox that life's failures bring success. He also notes how, when we are young and our bodies are strong, we aspire to impossible greatness, and he explains that this type of action makes man into a brute. With age, he says, comes acceptance and love of the flesh, even though it pulls us ever to the earth, while some years to reach a higher plane. A wise and older man realizes that all things are gifts from God and the flesh's limitations are to be appreciated even as we recognize them as limitations. His reason for begging patience is that our life on earth is but one step of our soul's experience, and so our journey will continue. Whereas youth is inclined to rage, age is inclined to await death patiently. Both are acceptable and wonderful, and each complements the other. What complicates the philosophy is that we are wont to disagree with each other, to have different values and loves. However, Rabbi begs that we not give too much credence to the earthly concerns that endanger argument and dissension. and trust instead that we are given by God and hence are fit for this struggle. The transience of time does not matter since this is only one phase of our existence, and we need not grow anxious about disagreements and unrealized goals. He warns against being distracted by the plastic circumstance, the phrase that he uses in the poem, of the present moment. And he ends by stressing that all is part of a unified whole, even if we cannot glimpse the whole. At the same time that age should approve of youth and embrace the present moment, it must be constantly looking upwards towards a heaven to come and hence simultaneously willing to renounce the present. When we take up the poem for analysis, this is a poem which is unique. Dramatic monologue by Browning because it is written from the perspective of a historical figure. And since it does not contain any clear audience or dramatic situation, it is more of a philosophical text rather than a proper poem. And much of the meaning is dissected, although we have discussed the summary. But now in this section, we will provide some context and simplification of the poem further. As discussed earlier, Rabbi Ben Ezra was a real historical figure of the 12th century. He was known for his philosophy. And his philosophy suggested good sometimes lies in its opposite, that is, badness or pain. Even if we are in a bad situation, we should not blame God because in that bad situation or painful situation, some good will arise and come out of it. Browning often takes a figure from the past. This is his style, and he uses the dramatic irony to propose a conflict between the words and meaning. But since we know that there is no audience here, and we don't know whom he speaks, whether he is speaking to a crowd of people, to God, or himself, we don't know. And we don't even know the stakes because what is he hoping to gain? So we are merely dissecting the philosophy as we go through the poem. Now, Rabi's philosophy is a paradox. This we have to understand because the struggles of life, he says, hold little meaning since life is but our soul's first step. And yet the wise man should appreciate everything about life. He also praises old age as the time when our soul reaches best fruition on earth. Because only in age we can understand this paradox that pain can be sweet, bad times can have goodness hidden into it. And then Rabi is willing to admire and appreciate every stage of life, even as he is quick to show the folly of all the stages. For instance, he says, youth operates from a place of capridium, that is, seizing the day, constantly and trying to transcend the limits of the body. He also notes that with age comes an awareness of the pain and difficulty of life. But he also says that wise man should not be weighed down but rather lightened by that realization. And he preaches that we should accept the present and not let the concerns of the present dominate us. What lies at the center of his creed is patience and complicity to what comes. So he does not deny the basic tenets of Capridium philosophy, that time is short and transient, the body does not keep its youth, the world is full of wonderful things to be exploited, but at the same time, he believes that focusing on the ways of the world distracts us from our greater goal, which is to continue growing even in the afterlife. Now, this is important to see that while Rabbi is praising age as superior, it is only superior because it recognizes the beauty of youth's earning. Without the latter, the former does not have an insight because without this, we will not be able to admire the age. And the most important lesson that we learn in old age is that we can know nothing and never truly transcend ourselves. Even if we feel that we are too experienced and too knowledgeable, there is still something left for us to appreciate and admire. And when we accept this limitation, we learn to be content and satisfied and patient because as we approach death. Now, this death is also not an end but a release to a greater sphere where our soul may continue to grow. Therefore, Ravi, when he embraces body and soul, youth and age, death and life, pain and joy, everything, he recognizes the contradictions hidden in the goal because the contradictions are beyond our comprehension, and by accepting those contradictions, we find true peace and true serenity. Now, taking up the poem stanza wise, you must be having the text with you in your prescribed textbook. Just a quick one line that the poem was published in the volume Dramatis Personae in 1864. And as we discussed earlier, that it gives us the philosophy of life. Old age, when we summarize the first five stanzas, we say that old age is the best period of life. The first period of life is youth. Youth has been made for old age. Man's life is a whole youth and old age together. That means youth and old age come together to make a whole of our life. Because it is not only in youth alone, youth is full of passion and energy, old age is full of spirituality. Life accomplishes and completes itself only with a blend and combination of these two things together, passion and energy combined with spirituality. Man is distinct or distinctive qualities differentiate or separate man from the beast because he has intelligence, and this intelligence separates him from animals. If man also wastes his life by simply running after pleasure, running after his desires, there will be nothing left to boast about. Because what makes man different from animals and separates him from animals is it only the care for food that we strive for our desires and fulfill our desires? Once the food is eaten or once the desires are accomplished, we have some other desires and other cares in the world. Man should not behave like this. And in the next stanzas, he says that man is not like animals because he simply doesn't worry about food. He knows about God and he thinks about God. And since he is intelligent, he has a mind, so he is nearer to God. Therefore, going nearer to God should be the aim of man in his life. Each failure or rebuff experienced by man should be welcome from him because through pains, through failures, through unsuccesses, we work harder. And joy, Browning says, is made up of three parts: pain, striving, hard labor. We put everything into our goals. Now, the paradox is whether we succeed in life when we fail. This is a paradox. Aspiration of man or ambitions of man, they count much more than his achievements. If we have a goal in life, if we have an aim in life, we work hard to achieve it. Even if we fail to do so, man should only make him work harder. His character should be molded by failures. That means failure should teach him a lesson. Adversities or failures teach us a lesson. Although we know that success and joys make our life easy and man becomes complacent, but failure is something that brings out the strength and courage of a man and shows that he is the best when he is failing. Man is no better than animal if his soul is also brutish and he only tries to satisfy his physical cravings like animals. In youth, we have its own uses, but experience in old age gives something else to us because when we learn from experience, it helps us to have a spiritual understanding of life as well as of God. And he understands that whole of life, man's life is part of God's plan, and man should only surrender to God and his plans. In the next five stanzas, he talks about body and soul, which are equally important because he says, body without soul makes man a brute. And we should not say that we have gone ahead in spite of the body, because success doesn't simply mean that we have grown strong body and beautiful body. Together, soul and body together make the whole of a man. So, age should acknowledge the contribution of youth and experience both, because it's only the experience which forms character and makes man complete. Old age is a period of rest because before the soul goes on with a new adventure. Man is complete, he is made according to God's plan, and before he puts those plans into practice or into, say, life, old age is the time to rest. And Browning hints here that there is, of course, his belief that there is an afterlife. So he should preserve his energies for afterlife also, because old age, when he rests, he has to put all the plans into action. In the next stanza, he says that the moment of death, when it comes, the soul leaves the body. And the soul, as defined by Browning, is nothing but man's experience, and which is ready for a new flight now. Now, in this formation, we see that the hand of God has always been with us, and he has been working accordingly. In youth, we always tend to make mistakes and learn from them. And in old age, we have a control over ourselves. We have a control over our passions and nature. This is what he calls as wisdom. Wisdom, of course, comes with age. And man should never be tempted by worldly pleasures. And it is the time when experience, wisdom, and sense of peace tells us that there is no need to be afraid of death. And therefore, keeping this in mind, we will wait for death very calmly and peacefully. Further, he says that as we grow, there comes wisdom, and we realize that everything has been working as per the God's plan. When in youth the body is working hard, the soul feeds the body. Now, at this age, who will give judgment and wisdom to man? This world believes that man's success is based on his achievement, but Browning says it is not so. Success does not depend upon achievement but on aspiration, on our intent, the kind of intent that we have for life. The goals, thoughts, aims, wishes, dreams, however hard we work to achieve them, they matter, but they should be performed and fulfilled with a good intent. So, man can be a failure, but in actuality, even if he fails, he is successful because the efforts that he has made to win the goals and matters. In God's eyes, these things matter. As a worldly man, we believe that life is temporary and will soon pass on. So we should make the best of our lives and we should enjoy life. And we know that we will grow old and weak and die. So we should enjoy. But what we do not realize is that the body changes, it grows and dies, but soul never dies. The earth and the seasons too pass, but souls remain eternal. Soul never dies because it only goes to another afterlife. It changes its body and goes to another body. It is immortal. So God and the soul survive like the potter and the clay. Everything else is temporary, will pass on, but the soul and God alone will last. So failure is just a mean in life to purify and strengthen our souls. Just as he says gold is purified by fire, so man's souls is made perfect by difficulties and failures. God is like a potter and man is the clay. Like a potter, God shapes the clay on the wheel, which is the world, and he experiences of youth makes lines on the picture of the plot. When they are formed, they are hardened, and near the rim, new lines are formed by age, which make him more stronger and make him more competent to bear any amount of stress.